Hey, welcome into the REVO Church podcast. My name is Jamie. I'm the discipleship pastor here at REVO. And hey, I'm the host of the podcast too. And over the entire month of June, we have been talking about what it looks like to invest in the next generation. We have looked at dads, the dadliest of dads. We had moms on the podcast, two moms on the couch. It was a great time. We talked about our world volunteers and how they are seeking to invest in the next generation. And today I'm joined by two of the student leaders at the campus. So, hey, I'm going to just pass the mic immediately to you two and say, give yourself a little introduction.
All right. Well, hey, my name is Michael. I am the student pastor at REVO, and so I'm pumped to be on the episode today. I think that parenting is definitely something we need to talk about. Why do we invest in the next generation? So, man, excited to be on.
My name is Dustin. I'm just one of the volunteers at South Fork here. I typically work with the high school guys, but try to help out wherever I can.
Awesome. Man, I'm excited for you guys to be here. Hopefully you're excited to be here. No nerves, no fears. It's going to be a good time. But we are in this podcast, we're talking all about investing in the next generation. So we're talking about what it looks like, why we should be doing it, and really just the main goal of, hey, we're investing because the next generation, they're not the future of the church. I've heard people say that. They're not the future. They are the current and present in the church. So we're going to be doing that today. But we are joined with the student volunteers. So my first thing that I want to hit right off the bat when we're talking about student volunteers and we're talking about investing is just a simple question of why did you decide to start investing in the next generation? Like, what draw was it for you to say, you know what? I want to give up my Wednesday nights to hang out with middle schoolers and high schoolers. Like, what sparked that in you?
Dustin, take this one first as a working man who has a full-time job,
Sure.
who shows up to a Wednesday after work. What's your why?
Yeah.
Well, the why is really, I think it just starts with the Great Commission, right? Of go and make disciples. And, let's not always just go out into other countries or other neighborhoods, right? Making disciples starts here in the church. And the kids, I don't know, I was just got into some like leadership type of things, right? And one aspect of learning about how to be a good leader was make yourself replaceable, right? And so the people who are going to be replacing me or any other people in the church are going to be the kids. Like, they're part of the church now. They're here looking after us, trying to learn from us, right? And how to be good members of the church and good servants. And so we got to get started now.
I like that. I like the idea. It's a weird thing when you talk about leadership of you're almost making yourself replaceable. Like, your goal is to work yourself out of a job for someone else. Like, It almost feels a little bit odd, but I like that perspective on it. Michael, you're full-time in ministry, dedicated to seeking and serving students. Why?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the time in my life where I was not full-time in ministry. Even in my late high school years, I was poured into so heavily by leaders around me. And growing up, even in the church, even when I wasn't quite walking with Jesus, I was always treated like a member of the church. My church growing up, it was quite big for a while, and eventually kind of the numbers started to decline a little bit, and now it's kind of growing again. But there was a point in time where like our student ministry was a large driving factor in volunteering in the church and serving in the church and investing in the church. And I was one of those people that was invested in and treated like, hey, I was an important part of what God was doing in the life of our church. Yeah. And so late in high school, my kind of career path started changing, and God started calling me into full-time ministry where I serve now. But the why has always been just to look back and realize that, like you said in the beginning, like middle schoolers, high schoolers, even elementary schoolers, like, they're not the church of tomorrow. They're not the next generation. Like, they're currently here. They're currently in our churches. They're currently involved. And I believe that when you give them special attention and a ministry that focuses specifically on their needs and where they're at, they're going to thrive and flourish and lean into that role of being an important part of the church of today, not tomorrow.
Yeah. I think I kind of piggyback off of similarly what both of y'all were saying. I work at the North Campus with student ministry. I joke I wear a lot of random hats around the church. And one of them is student ministry for North Campus. And here's what I know: students mimic a lot of things. They take examples, they take what they hear, what they see, what they know, and they'll mimic a ton of things. Working with students, you'll notice influences on their life. So is there anything you've noticed in your time working with students that you can look back and say, you know what, their parents were doing these things in their life, or were pouring into them, that are now being poured out by the students? Is there anything you've noticed, or like from the parents' lives, what they're encouraging, how they're treating them, like all those things that you can then look back and say, you know what, I see the parents' influence on the kids in a positive manner?
Something I seen early on. This was when I was still in college, and I was serving at a student ministry, and there was a student who, like, they just didn't want to be there. They didn't want to attend, and the parent kind of took a step back and said, all right, well, like, if you don't want to go, like, they were a late high schooler, they were older, they could, they had their own car, their own wheels, and the parent was like, all right, you know what, like, if you don't want to go, I get that, right?
Yeah.
But then the parent kind of took a look at what they were doing in their life, and they were pounding the table on, hey, church attendance is important. Like, you've got to be there, you've got to show up, you've got to go, you've got to commit. And then, like, the question was posed of, like, well, are you modeling that for them, right? And the parent was like, well, like, I was plugged into a small group, and like, life got busy, so my attendance was spotty, and of course we want to go out of town for all these big weekends, Memorial Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day, and so, well, we'll take time off then. And sometimes, like, I have a long week at work, so I just don't want to go on a Sunday morning because I want to sleep in another day. And they began to realize and ask themselves, like, all right, wait, I'm not prioritizing this. Why would my student, who, by the way, are always watching, right? Why would they want to prioritize something that I'm not saying is important with my actions? And so what was really cool is they knew they didn't have much time. The student was they were a junior, and it was like halfway through the year. The parent's like, I don't have much longer to make a lasting impact, to show my child that church is important. Yeah. And so they started prioritizing it. They didn't miss anything. And I'm not saying that going to church makes you a Christian, right? But, like, they were trying to set an example, and they did. And it was about halfway through this dude's senior year, he starts coming back on Wednesdays. Hadn't seen him in a while. And I was like, hey, like, why are you all of a sudden back plugged in and involved with us? And he's like, look, like, I've seen what church attendance and faith has done in my parents' life. Wow. And I decided to at least give it another try, right? So, man, that's just like leading by example in a really small and trivial way that I saw, that I just really admired, like a parent realizing that their actions are also very, they need to be backed up, or their words need to be backed up by their actions. So that was cool.
No, it's the whole idea of not do what I say, it's do what I do.
Yeah, 100%.
That's so powerful. Dustin, anything you've noticed?
Yes, kind of in the same vein of, like you said, kids are always watching, right? So now there's two different ideas that I've seen before. One, when your parents, they're going to church, right? But if you can also get involved and get serving and bring your kids along, especially at a young age, right? When they can't go out and just, they don't have their own car or something, right? They're along with you. They're already in that environment. They're comfortable at church. They get to know all the people at church because they're serving. And they get to just see their parents being these servants that are always willing to work and put in time. And it's just another way of showing this is a high priority, right? Yeah. And then the other thing that I like is, this may be a popular thing that people have heard before, but this idea of letting your kid catch you in the act, right? But in a good way, right? So if you're...
I'll always whip open doors. I love catching people in the act.
So, like having your Bible study instead of in the bedroom, like with the door locked and no kids can get to you, have it out on the, kitchen table or something, right? And your kids wake up, come in there in the morning or whatever time you do it, and they just see you always doing your Bible studies, right? Or just your praying time. Let it be where they can just see you, get a good example. Oh yeah, that's something that's really important to my parents, and that's something that I should be doing, right?
I think, I'm thinking like at South Fork, there's a ton of students right now that are volunteering and serving. I know there's students that are serving like back in the production booth because they're seeing like their parents are serving, and it's an expectation of, hey, like, in this house we serve.
Right.
A couple weeks ago, I was talking with Kevin Harrison from North Campus, and one of the things his family does is they will help clean up. We have a coffee bar at North, and they'll help clean up. And what's cool is like you'll see like Truett and Kate. Truett's going into a sophomore year of high school. Kate's going into her senior year. And Zeke, when he's back from college, like they come in and after service, they're cleaning up. They're cleaning up the lobby, picking up trash, like going through the bathrooms, like cleaning it. Not because no high schooler is like, I want to clean this up. That's them looking and seeing their parents putting this influence of saying, this is what we do. In our house, we're serving the Lord. In our house, we're going to follow Jesus. And so they're stepping up. And so I think like for me, I often see the influence, not in like, some of it is like, yes, like you'll see like, oh man, you tell jokes. Like I heard your dad tell that same joke. Like it's crazy. But a lot of times you'll see like the students that are taking their faith and really taking it by the hands, like fully their faith. Oftentimes you can look back and see, okay, their parents were modeling this. Yeah. The students that are excited about serving, you look and say, oh, that makes sense. Their parents are serving. The students that are reading their Bible, oh, they see their parents reading the Bible. Yeah. Talking about reading the Bible, that's a spiritual discipline. We've been in the last 2 months, I feel like if you've been following along on the church podcast, we've been talking about spiritual disciplines. They are ways that we can learn more about Jesus and start to grow closer to him. And so we talked all about like Bible reading, prayer, fasting, worship. If you haven't seen those, hey, I challenge you, pause the video, go watch them, and then come back. But talking about spiritual disciplines, they're important. Yeah. Hopefully we agree they're important.
Absolutely.
They are.
And so I'd love to know, like, do you see the students practicing these different disciplines? And then is there things that maybe you try to do or you hope are being done to help teach them, hey, they are important?
A lot of it, what's really interesting is a lot of it is caught. We've already said this. We'll probably talk about it more, but like, you know, students catch things from what they see around them. And I know for a fact there's more than what I'm seeing, but from what I'm privy to being able to see, I know there are definitely students in our ministry who prioritize some of these spiritual disciplines. One of the main ones is reading your Bible, which we talk about at REVO Students all the time. Like if you want to have a better relationship with God and know more about who he is, the best way to do that is by reading your Bible, right? That's the objective of Christianity, is to like, hey, I want to grow in my relationship with God. You got to be reading about who he is. And I see that with students more than you'd think. Like students are hungrier than we give them credit for.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think as again, like I'm not a parent of a teenager right now. So where, and nor is Dustin.
I'm not a parent at all.
And nor are you.
I'm not a parent.
So we are speaking from what we have witnessed. Yeah. And I've had the chance to witness a lot of really quality parents. And if you're like, am I a quality parent? I believe if you're putting your kid in the right places, then you're doing what you can. Then you're a quality parent for trying to, you know, it's like they're never going to be perfect. But I've seen a lot of parents just instill this importance of, hey, you really need to be in the Word. And students have access to the Bible in more places than we think as well. Like it's not just your paper copy. Like students are reading their Bible digitally. I read my Bible predominantly digitally, and maybe that's not a good thing, but I think it's okay because I'm reading it, right? And I take it in that way. And there's so many ways for students to consume God's word. I have a guy, an 11th grader at the Walkertown campus right now who I was talking to a few weeks back, and he says that every morning, this has not been always a habit, but every morning for the past like 6 months, he knows the only time in the day he's going to have to get into his word is by just getting out earlier than everybody else. And so he shows up to school 30 minutes early, and he's in his word and he's taking notes. And I was like, I don't believe you. Can I see proof?
Like, there's no way.
And he showed me proof. I was like, that's cool. That's awesome. And what was cool is this young man said, hey, like, this is something that at points in my life I've witnessed my parents do, but also it's things that I've witnessed like my student volunteers doing and other spiritual mentors in my life. And so, yeah, I believe that students they're only going to do what they know. right? So if we're talking about all these spiritual disciplines, like you did what, 10
Yeah.
on the
A
podcast?
lot.
You know, there's
Quite a few.
there's even debatably like more than 10, right? You could break them down even further. And so like if these students don't know what these disciplines are, they're not going to do them.
Yeah.
And so as a parent, like I think it's important that we're aware of what those are, and that we're not just telling our students to do them, but like attempting to model them as well.
Yeah.
Just so that they can be continuing to grow, like in their relationship and their faith, taking it seriously.
Yeah.
Yep. I think there's a lot of accountability too is a big thing for me, right? We want to teach them about spiritual disciplines and we want to lead by example, but there is also an aspect of accountability of, you know, I ask my guys as often as I can, have you been reading your Bible lately?
Yeah.
Right. Oh, no, you haven't? Okay, why not? Like, let's get this figured out. Or even in the aspect of, okay, what about prayer? As much as my guys, you know, they might not be thrilled with how often I ask them to pray to lead out small group. I'm hoping in the future they'll realize, oh yeah, Dustin was trying to get me to, you know, be actively involved in praying, and honestly, not even to be embarrassed to do it in a group, right? Just don't be shy about your faith. Be willing to pray and do these spiritual disciplines, even if other people can see, right? It's not why we do them, but if we can leave a better example that way, then so be it.
Yeah.
One thing I've noticed. So we just started 2 weeks ago. I was with I flip flop back and forth at North Campus between being with the middle schoolers and then being with the high schoolers, just depending on who we have, what's going on. And the high schoolers, one of the questions we talked about was like, hey, have you been reading your Bible recently? This was 2 weeks ago. And they were like, well, no, I hadn't read the Bible. One of them was like, I was reading it really good when we were doing these Bible reading plans together way back when we were doing students and we had messages and then we had Bible reading plans to go along with it. And he told me, he's like, I was doing it, you know, every day, like when we were going through it, and then we haven't had one. It hasn't been talked about. And that really hit me of like, oh man, I'm constantly like, you need to read the Bible, guys. You need to read the Bible. Read the Bible. It'll bring you closer to Jesus. You want to know Jesus? Like, you want to know the answer to the problem you're facing? Get in the Word.
Yeah.
And then I wasn't providing them a way to get in the Word. And so we actually started, and this is something cool for if you don't know, hey, here's a resource for you. And if you guys don't know, here's a resource for you. On the Bible app, which probably I would bet that almost every person has on their phone.
Dude, it's got like 500 million downloads. You've got it on your phone.
Like you have it on your phone. It might be hid in a folder somewhere. Like
And if you don't, it's free.
If you don't, it's free account. It's probably been sending you that notification every day of the verse of the day, and you swipe it away because let's be honest, we're sinful humans. But you can open that app, and I mean this genuinely, there's a bajillion.
Hey, that's a real number. There is a bajillion.
There is a bajillion Bible reading plans on there. But what's cool about it is you can go and pick any of those plans, and then you can share it with people. And so I got a group there's 4 of us, and we are in a Bible reading plan. And so what happens is every day we get in the Word. It's we're going through Philippians. We read it, and then it has a section where we can talk about it. And so what's been really awesome to see is these guys that are, you know, sophomores, juniors in high school are reading the Word, and then they're typing and sharing with all of us what they've read, what they've learned, what God's challenging them to do. And so I was like, man, like we're telling them to grow and to read, and we're challenging them just in student ministry. If you need to read the Bible, and it's like, are we even providing them an opportunity? Because so often it's like, you need to grow, and people are like, great, I want to.
How?
How?
Yeah.
We talked about that at our group. I want to grow. How? And so in this, it's like, you know what? This is a way that you can take that. That's a resource. Hey, it's a free resource.
It is a free resource. Yeah.
Check it out.
Jamie, can I say something real quick? Can I interrupt you?
Oh, absolutely.
On the vein of spiritual disciplines, I think a common pain point for parents that I've heard through conversations or emails or whatever it is I'm trying to instill this into my student.
Yep.
But they're just not getting it.
Yep.
And I think the issue is that they probably are getting it, but at their own pace.
Yeah.
I think as adults who are in the workforce and, we pay bills, it feels like the first of the month comes around so fast.
It
like,
comes around 12 times a year.
Everything.
I don't understand.
Everything in our circles as adults moves so quickly, and we're expected to just adapt and change with it. I think that when it comes to students learning disciplines and new behaviors, it happens slower than we like to admit.
Yep.
Now, there's always the exception, right? There's always that one
there's
random.
Always that one
it's like the 0.1% of athletes who will play D1 and then go on to the they're unusually driven and unusually motivated. There are certainly kids in our student ministries and in our churches who spiritually are unusually motivated. But as a parent, if you're looking around the landscape of our church and our ministry, and you're like, man, I just feel like my kid isn't getting it. I feel like it's not clicking. I'd be willing to bet that it is clicking. It's just taking them longer than we would prefer. And so there's a lot of patience that goes into these spiritual disciplines. I think parents have it the hardest because they see it daily. It's a conundrum. They see it every day. So they see it's a slow progression, right? We as student pastors and volunteers, we see it weekly. So we actually see a little bit more of a progress. It's like when you haven't seen somebody in 3 years, you're like, you've gotten so big, but like they look at themselves
in the good way.
They look at themselves in the mirror every day and they're like, I'm not getting any bigger. I'm not growing. I'm not changing. And so the parents have it the hardest because you guys are the ones who it's like every day you see the positives and then you see the 35 steps back. We see it a little more gradually. And then in 5 years, we're all going to see it the same though. And so that's my thing is I'm not trying to take too much of the time there, but I do feel like if you're a parent and you're like, man, they're not getting it. It's happening too slowly. It's a grind, but man, they will get it if you're trying to talk about it and model it. It might take longer than we're willing to admit, and that's okay.
So here's the thing. Have you ever had a student ask you a question that you just stepped back and said, what just happened?
Many times.
Many times. I've had so many questions over the years where I'm just like, how does this even pop into somebody's brain? Like, it's the question you start to think like, is this real life? Like, are they really saying that? So I would love to just give you a second to share, because here's the thing. Here's what I know. When I was a student, I wasn't going up and talking to my parents about things. I wasn't going up and saying, hey, I have this question about the Bible. I have this question about Jesus, the relationships. Somebody did this thing and like, is it good? Is it bad? Is it right? Is it wrong? Like, I wasn't going to my parents with any of those questions. I would definitely go to my friends. I would occasionally go to a leader. So I'd love to just, not a full confessional, but I'd love if there was any questions that you felt like were asked or topics that were brought up that maybe parents might not be aware of. Maybe they don't know that it's being asked. They don't know that it's a thing. So I'd love to give you a second to just be like, hey, this was brought up and you should be aware of it.
I'm gonna let you take that one first.
Okay. So, I like specifics aren't coming to my mind right now, but here's a theme that I notice. Okay. A common theme of questions that students ask is always along the lines of what's wrong and what's right. Like, how much can I do this certain thing?
Where is that line at?
Hey, like, I remember, you know what? I'll throw myself under the bus. When I was in high school, the question was, hey, and like, we're married now, right? But the question was like, hey, like, can I hold my girlfriend's hand? Can I kiss my girlfriend? What's too far, right? And so like those are the questions that students, it's not always that, but it's always like they're scoping out the perimeter, right? Like, what am I allowed to do? How far can I go? Or like, what are the boundaries? They're trying to get the lay of the land. And I think that's indicative to where middle schoolers and high schoolers are at in their lives. They're at a point in their lives where they're literally trying to map out what they believe, what they're going to do, where they're going to go one day. And so everything they do, the things that frustrate you as a parent and as a volunteer leader, right? And then the things as a parent that make you rejoice, it's all their way of testing what they know and determining if they want to believe it or not. And so that's why sometimes they might not want to ask like you as the parent, because they might not want you to quite know what they're wrestling with.
Yep.
And that's not a violation of trust. That doesn't mean that they don't trust you. Honestly, it simply means they're just trying to figure it out for themselves. And so I think that's okay. I think there's a level where we need to be careful with that, right? Like even in student ministry, if a student asks me over and over and over again, like a same kind of concerning question, like I'm going to talk to a parent. Like I had a student, and I'll be honest with you, it was out of the blue. This was a couple years ago. And it was like one of those moments where you just kind of know you need to do something. And so it was a text that came into my phone, and it was like, hey, Michael, like if somebody commits suicide, what happens to them? Do they go to heaven or hell? And I look at this text come through, and I'm like, this doesn't feel right, you know?
The red flags.
And so I instantly call this guy, and I said, all right, we need to talk about this. What's going on? And the red flags were right. And in that moment, it was, hey, I need you to know what I'm going to have to do with what you just told me, right? Like I think that this is something that involves your safety and your health. So we're going to talk with your parents, right? And so, you know, we did that. And so I think just there's outlets that students feel like they can ask questions. There's outlets where they feel like they can't. But yeah, that predominant theme is like they're testing the waters and they want to know. And the fact that the questions are being asked is a good thing. Yeah. You don't want those to go unanswered. And so sometimes you'll ask a parent, sometimes you won't. But I think as long as they're being asked to the right people, like it's okay. Yeah. Yeah. A little wordy, but that's what I got.
I know there's one thing talking to you, Dustin, and also Casey. Y'all talk about how, you know, growing up, y'all were able to just sit and talk about things. Yep. I remember the first time I went to lunch with all of, you know, you and Case and y'all's parents, and we were eating lunch at the table, which already blew my mind because most of the time growing up, like, we would take our food and go watch TV, you know? Yeah. And so y'all were eating, and then you would leave. And then, you know, like, that was my thought. But instead, y'all would sit and talk about, like, the message that was preached on Sunday. Y'all would then start branching that off into these deeper topics and these deeper questions. I don't exactly know how to ask it because you might not know the answer to it. Might have the wrong person on the podcast for this. But do you know what caused you to feel like you could ask those questions?
That's a good question.
Let's see. I guess it was just this this kind of inquisitive, you know, atmosphere that was in our family, right? It was mostly my dad, but even mom too. But you know, my dad would always be asking questions, you know, oh, what about this or that, or what do you think about this idea? Like, that's kind of weird. What do you think? And I think, you know, that was just an atmosphere that we felt, okay, yeah, we can ask these weird questions. And, you know, there's no problem with asking weird questions, right? You're not going to get, you know, made fun of or like, oh, no, that's a stupid question. You can't ask that. Or you're not even really going to get in trouble, right? Unless, you know, you just throw yourself under the bus or something. But as far as just asking questions, and so that I think, allowed our curiosity to just go out the window, right? And so we were constantly just, you know, something would be happening like in a church sermon. And it's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I wonder how that affects this other thing. And just this kind of, well, you know, I'll kind of work through that myself, see what I can get. Oh, but let's check what the rest of my family has to say about this. They'll have some different opinions. And so it's just a lot of theorizing and, just honestly having fun, right? Thinking about how crazy the universe is.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. The first time I was at that Sunday lunch, football was paused. I'm like, all right, we're going to pause. That's fine. We'll
Gotta get
we'll
back to
eat and
football
go get
soon.
back to it. And then we sat at the table, and I'm just sitting like, all right, guys. I'm getting that notification. All right, guys.
It is a
Game's going on.
Yeah, it is a unique experience for people who didn't grow up like us. I know it can throw some people off at just the kind of questions that we're willing to ask, and some people are like, "Why do you even care?" It's like that's just part of the fun.
It's just fun. I want to cover one more thing before we close. I personally, middle school transition to high school. High school, you'll see students transition to college or transition to work. I believe growing up is one big transition, right? Of, you go from a baby to then you can start crawling. From crawling, you're now walking, and that opens up everything. From walking, hey, now they're potty trained. Now they can start to eat they're eating fully real food. To then, get older, they can pack their own lunch. To then hit middle school, moving into high school, moving into driving, moving into college or work. It's all one big transition. What are some ways that, parents can help with that transition without them feeling like they're being that weird parent, and without making the kid be like, "Mom, get out of the room."
Yeah. All right, I'll go back to what I said earlier. In that, when it comes to the questions students ask, a lot of times it's testing the boundaries.
Yep.
Well, I've seen it a lot of times, and I've read some books and articles on this too, where those transition points in the lives of these teenagers, it's happening at a time where their brain is also still like actively developing.
Oh yeah.
And we have a very smart neuroscientist who's watching in the editing room, so I'm not gonna overstep my bounds here.
She'll leave a comment if you get it wrong.
But what I do know is that from a young age, our brains are exposed to so many different things, and our brains through early adolescence are like actively trying to eliminate information that is not needed.
Yeah.
And hold on to information that is absolutely necessary, which is why like they say that the younger you start forming like habits of worship or prayer or Bible reading, the far more likely you are to have a strong devout faith late into your life.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think about. And so during these points of transition though, what happens is they're again just questioning everything. There's a noticeable transition from elementary to middle school, where all the things they've been taught, they're questioning, is it true? Is it valid? Right? So they're exploring that. Then when they transition from middle school to high school, they're questioning, do I want this or need this? Is this who I am? Is this what I want to be about? And so as a parent in those circumstances, the best thing you can do is give your kids a good environment to test that.
Yeah.
So many times I see that a kid's main community is like their sports team, like their travel ball team or something. Or like their main community is their dance friends. Hey, it's what they're into. They like dance. And so they've got all these people they surround themselves with. There's nothing wrong with hobbies. There's nothing wrong with that kind of stuff. And you can learn valuable things from that. But as a parent, if you really want your kid to navigate these transitions well, the best thing you can do is put them in Christ-centered Christian community.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And so I'll kind of just build on that.
Yeah.
So if you are a parent and you've set up this good Christian environment for your kid to grow up in, with me being with the high schoolers, I am really focused on what is happening after high school, right? When they're starting to move out of the parents' house, and especially if they're going to college, right? As we all know, a lot of colleges are not very Christian friendly
Yep.
anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so this kind of stepping out where, into a world that is not necessarily a Christian friendly environment, one, it's good to give them the tools so that they can either build their own Christian environment or find one, that they can become a part of that is not just, with the family and the friends that they grew up with. But even specifically with the college thing, I like the idea, they're going to come into contact with people who have opposing views, right? Who are either just criticizing or just actively, almost vehement against Christianity, right?
Just the complete opposite.
Yeah. And so my concern a lot of times is even if they're in a good Christian environment, a lot of times that can, if you need to understand that they won't always be in that environment. So prepare them for that step, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying, oh, you should teach them how to be a good atheist or something, right? I'm not saying that, but make sure they're exposed to these other viewpoints and, these other thought processes that people have, and, make sure they're able to be, when they come in contact with them, they're comfortable, they're not going to have a crisis of faith or something, right? And make sure they're confident in how they can handle that, but also be able to handle it with like grace and humility, right? And be a good Christian witness to these outside environments that they haven't grown up with.
And as we close out, I would love to just give you a second to share with parents, maybe some, wisdom or, if you have advice that you could give that you think might help them when it comes to their teenager. Because I'm sure I know there's parents that are like, I feel like it's just not working.
Yeah.
I'm trying things and it's just not working. I'm telling them about Jesus. They're coming to student ministry. Maybe they might, I'm buying them Bibles and resources and taking them things, and I don't feel like it's working. Do you have any advice that you would want to give to them, or maybe just some encouragement?
I guess kids are, obviously we know kids, all of them are different, right? And they all respond in different ways, and they all need different guidance, right? But I would say every kid needs some amount of structure, but especially as the kids are getting older, they also need some amount of freedom, right? So I know it's difficult, but try to find the balance between those two things, right? So they're not just, so pressured, like, oh, you have to be a Christian kind of thing, right? That they get angry or upset or, try to run away from that. But also give them enough structure that when they are seeking Christ, they have the resources around them to be able to meet that, right? And honestly, if you're struggling about figuring out what kind of structure to give them, go to someone who's going to be very honest with you, right? Even in, here's what you're doing wrong, right?
Yeah, we don't like that very often.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard and it might be painful.
Yeah.
But you need to find somebody who's going to be just super honest and will point out things where you need to be better.
It's obvious, but you cannot isolate yourself as a parent, because then you'll start to overanalyze everything you're doing, and everything will be wrong or like not working or whatnot. And so you need to just have community around you. So if you're listening to this and like you're like, Michael, I'm at REVO and my kid is plugged into student ministry, but like I feel like they're still not growing, then what? And I would just say continue to keep them involved, but also for you as a parent, man, like don't just drop your student off on a Wednesday and like just, all right, see you later, Billy, and then just let them like walk up to the building and then just pick them up and, hey, like, get out of your car. Like there's other parents who are trying to drop their kids off too. Like we would love to connect you with other parents in our ministries. Also just realizing like, we have limited time with your students. 52 Wednesdays. We don't even meet every Wednesday. So we might have like 48 hours a year, with your student. That's 2 days. We'll give you 4 days because you're asleep for 12 of those, right? And so like we would love to partner with you. Like, we have bandwidth to answer questions and phone calls and have meetings, or like just invest. Like, man, does your kid have like a sports game coming up? Like, hey, like, their volunteer would love to know that.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, they would love to support them in that. Other parents and families in the church would love to come alongside you and support you and help you. And if you have questions, like, you're probably not the only parent who has questions at our church. Probably every parent is thinking some of the same things. And so again, like, think tank it. Don't just isolate and say, I'm the only one going through this, and so maybe I got to try looking somewhere else. But rather lean in and say, all right, who else is dealing with this? How has it worked? How has it not worked? Can we come up with a solution together? Can we pull volunteers and staff members into it? Like, we are a resource for you. Other parents are a resource for you. We're not meant to do life alone. That's why we have church. Otherwise, we would just record these episodes, and that's all we would do. We wouldn't even have Sunday gatherings, right? But we know it's important. We know gathering is important. And so don't isolate. Like, you got to find that community. That's a really good tip. I've seen when parents are not connected and what happens. And I've seen when parents are connected and what happens. Doesn't guarantee easy sledding, but it does set themselves up for success and their kids up for success.
Yeah, I like that. If I could throw in anything, we've talked about it multiple times already, but hey, just have some patience.
Yeah.
Patience, it's tough. I don't have kids, but from seeing my sisters, from seeing friends, family members, I know that it's not easy.
Yeah.
Like, I know that you can be doing all the right things, and hey, maybe it doesn't work. You can be bringing them, and then they do something that, well, let's be honest, might be a little dumb. Have some patience. Trust that God has a plan. And then my other piece of advice would just be, hey, any way you can, share Jesus with them. Whether that's you're having conversations about it, where you're sitting at the dinner table and you're like, hey, let's talk about, we were at church on Sunday, let's talk about Pastor Matthew. Let's talk about Pastor Stephen's message. Let's talk about Pastor Nathan. Let's see what did they talk about? Let's dive into it. Maybe it's just you're sharing Jesus with them in the way you react. Like, if you're driving and somebody cuts you off, a big tell is, are you acting like Jesus in that moment? Would they be able to step back and say they followed Jesus even when they got angry at the Toyota Prius? Like, if you have a Prius, I'm sorry.
Always the Prius drivers.
It's always the Prius. But man, show some patience for them. Share Jesus with them. Be that constant drip, that culture setter. I've heard it said, you're not meant to be I don't know, You're not meant to be a thermometer. That's the word I was looking for. You're not meant to be a thermometer. You're meant to be a thermostat. You're not coming into your kid's life and raising to wherever they are, figuring out if they're down here, oh, I got to drop down here. You're meant to be the thermostat where you're setting the stage of this is where we're going to be. And like they say, for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So this has been the REVO Church podcast, talking all about pouring into the next generation with talking with student volunteers. Guys, I appreciate you being on the podcast. It's been
Glad to be here.
It's been a blast. And like I said, this is the last one. So if you missed the other three, hey, go back and give them a watch. But we'll see you next time.